They say betrayal doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from the person who promised to protect your heart. That truth hit me like a storm. The day my wife walked out of the courthouse, smiling, while I sat in my truck, watching the rain swallow the world around me. The papers were signed. 15 years of marriage. Gone in 15 minutes. My wedding ring lay on the dashboard, catching faint light from the street lamp outside. I stared at it, not as a memory, but as a warning. One signature. That's all it took to erase everything I built, everything I believed in, everything I was. Rebecca didn't just leave me. She took me apart, piece by piece. The house, hers. The savings, hers. Even Miller Design Works, the company I built with my own 2 hands, hers. I had nothing left. No home, no money. Not even pride. Just a truck that barely ran and a silence that pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. But even as I sat there in that parking lot, drenched in disbelief, one thought cut through the fog. She took everything. Except the truth. And that truth, though buried deep, was about to rise. I wasn't always broken. Once, I was in love. I met Rebecca at a community fundraiser downtown. She was radiant, confident, kind, the kind of woman who could make a crowded room go quiet. I was just a small-town architect back then, trying to make a name for myself. She saw something in me that night. Or maybe she saw an opportunity. We married fast. Young love tends to sprint. Within a year, we had a cozy little home, 2 dogs, and a dream. Then came the kids, Emily and Jake, the center of my world. Life felt right. We laughed, we fought. We planned our future together. And when I started my design business, Miller Design Works, Rebecca insisted she handle the finances so I could focus on creating. I trusted her completely. That was my first mistake. Looking back now, I can see how the distance began. She used to text me during lunch, just to say she missed me. Then, the messages stopped. Her phone was always locked. The girls' nights turned into weekend retreats. When I asked questions, she'd smile, kiss my cheek, and say, "You worry too much, John." But her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. I started sleeping on the couch, pretending I fell asleep watching TV, just so I wouldn't hear her whispering on the phone at midnight. Still, I told myself it was fine. Every marriage hits rough patches, right? But deep down, I knew something was shifting, and not in my favor. One evening, she came home early. No smile. No warmth. Just a manila envelope in her hand. "John," she said flatly, "I think we need to go our separate ways." Divorce papers. At first, I thought it was a bad dream. Then I looked at the documents, the legal names, the signatures, the division of property, all prepared in advance. My business? Under her name. The house? Signed over years ago for tax reasons. Even the joint account was already emptied. She'd been planning this. Quietly, while I was busy building our life, I looked at her, the woman I thought I knew, and saw nothing familiar left. Just a stranger who had won a game I didn't even know I was playing. Back in the truck, the courthouse lights dimmed behind me. The rain slowed, but the storm inside didn't. 15 years of trust, erased with a pen stroke. People say heartbreak destroys you. They're wrong. It reveals you. And that night, as the wipers cleared the last bit of rain from the glass, I made myself a silent promise. You took everything, Rebecca, but you didn't take the truth. And one day, the truth will take everything back. They say love is blind, but I think love just chooses not to see. For years, I believed I had the perfect marriage. Rebecca and I were the couple people envied. 2 kids, a beautiful home, a growing business. From the outside, it looked flawless, but what people saw was only the surface. Underneath, there were cracks, small ones at first, but every lie, every half-truth widened them until everything finally fell apart. When I started Miller Design Works, Rebecca became my biggest supporter, or so I thought. She said, "John, you're the dreamer. Let me handle the boring stuff, The bills, the contracts, the taxes, and she did. With confidence. With a smile that made me feel safe. She said we should move all assets under her name, for tax benefits. I signed. I didn't question. Why would I? We were a team. But now, looking back, I realize I wasn't her partner. I was her project. She made every financial move with precision, subtle, patient, deliberate. Each step took me 1 inch further from control. It started small. She'd correct me in front of friends. "Oh, John's terrible with money." They'd laugh. I'd laugh too. I didn't see what she was doing. She'd forget to tell me about certain expenses. Cancel plans without asking. Make decisions for both of us and call it efficiency. Slowly my independence faded, not because she demanded it, but because she replaced it with comfort. She isolated me without ever raising her voice. I stopped going out with friends. I worked longer hours, thinking I was building a future, not realizing I was building her exit plan. Mark, my best friend, once pulled me aside and said, "John, I don't like the way she talks to you. You're shrinking." I brushed him off. "You don't know her like I do," I said. But maybe he knew her better than I ever did. Then came the distance, emotional first, then physical. Rebecca's laughter turned sharp. Her compliments turned into criticisms. She started dressing differently, going out more, always with new friends I never met. I remember one evening asking where she was going. She said, "Book club." Her perfume lingered long after she left, too strong for a simple meeting about novels. Nights turned into weekends away. She'd come home late, phone in hand, typing fast and hiding the screen the moment I entered the room. When I tried to ask questions, she'd tilt her head and smile, that same smile that once melted me, and whisper, "You're imagining things, John. You've been working too hard." She made me question my own instincts, my own sanity. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I followed her car after she said she was meeting her friends downtown. I parked across the street from the restaurant. Through the window, I saw her, not with her friends, but with a man. They were sitting close. Too close. Laughing, touching hands. It felt like someone had punched the air out of my chest. I didn't confront them then. I drove home in silence. But when she walked through the door hours later, I asked, calmly, "Who was he, Rebecca?" She didn't even blink. Just stared at me and said, "Are you seriously spying on me now? This is pathetic." And just like that, the guilt shifted from her to me. I was the paranoid one, the insecure husband. The problem, that night, I realized something terrifying. Rebecca wasn't just drifting away. She was building a case. Every argument, every accusation was part of her story. A story she would later tell the court. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, one thought wouldn't leave my mind. She wasn't leaving me suddenly. She'd been rehearsing it for years. Every smile, every lie, every "for us" decision. It was all part of a plan I never saw coming. I thought we were building a future together, but all along, she was building an escape route. Love made me blind. But betrayal, it opened my eyes. When you lose everything, silence becomes your loudest companion. After the divorce, I moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. The kind of place where the wallpaper peels and the light flickers when the wind hits the wires. It wasn't home, just a shelter for what was left of me. The house was gone. The business was gone. Even my kids, Emily and Jake, barely called anymore. Rebecca told them I was busy rebuilding. But I knew what she meant. She'd turned them against me, slowly, carefully. She was rewriting our story. And I was the villain. Every time I saw their faces, they looked a little more distant, a little more hers. There were nights I'd sit by the window, staring at the glow of the city, wondering how someone you love could plan your downfall so perfectly. But the thing about losing everything is, it strips you down to the truth. And one night, that truth came knocking. It started with a cardboard box. I was unpacking old files, contracts, Sketches, receipts, leftovers from Miller Design Works. At the bottom of that box, I found an old folder. Yellowed edges. Labeled, Client Transactions 2015. At first, I almost tossed it. But something made me stop. Inside were printouts of invoices I didn't recognize. Large sums of money moved to accounts I'd never seen. And every single one of those transactions was signed by Rebecca. My heart started pounding. They weren't just payments, they were transfers. From my business account to something labeled RN Consulting, LLC RM Rebecca Miller. It hit me like a punch. While I was designing houses, she was building her escape, using my company as the foundation. The next day, I called Mark, my best friend, the one who'd warned me years ago. He showed up with 2 cups of coffee and the kind of look you give a man standing on the edge. I laid out the papers on the table. She moved money out of the business. Thousands, maybe more. Mark scanned the files, eyes narrowing. John, this isn't just betrayal. This looks like fraud. That word echoed in my head. Fraud. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. A misunderstanding. But the numbers didn't lie. Mark leaned forward, serious now. You need to dig deeper. Check the old accounts, the emails, everything. Don't let her walk away with this. That night I couldn't sleep. So I didn't. The apartment turned into an investigation room. Receipts covered the floor. My laptop glowed past midnight. I went through old emails, client lists, even Rebecca's saved documents on a shared drive. She must have forgotten to delete. Each click revealed another lie. Fake invoices. Duplicate payments. Business funds redirected into her personal account, masked as consulting fees. She'd been siphoning money for years, setting up a second life right under my nose. And when she had enough, she left. The more I uncovered, the colder I felt. It wasn't just about love anymore. It was theft, deception, calculation. I realized something painful. She never planned to build a future with me. She planned to own mine. At dawn, I sat at that same old table, surrounded by the wreckage of paperwork. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the blinds, hitting the wedding photo I'd forgotten to pack away. In that picture, we were smiling. Now I understood why hers looked so calm. She already knew how this story would end. Or so she thought, because now I had proof. Cold, undeniable proof. I looked down at the files, at the trail of signatures and lies, and whispered to myself, she didn't just betray me. She stole my life. But if she thought she could bury the truth, she underestimated the man she left behind. They say every storm runs out of rain. For months, I'd been living under clouds that wouldn't clear. After I found the proof, Rebecca's hidden accounts, her forged transactions, I didn't know where to start. I wasn't just betrayed. I was trapped. She had the money, the house, the connections. I had nothing but papers, memories, and anger. But sometimes, anger can become fuel. One morning, Mark, my friend, my only lifeline, slid a business card across the diner table. It read, Susan Carter, attorney at law. She's the best in town, Mark said. She doesn't lose, especially not to people who think they're untouchable. I hesitated. I'd been burned enough to doubt anyone. But something in Mark's eyes told me to trust her. Later that afternoon, I walked into Susan's office, a small place tucked between 2 old buildings. Nothing fancy, but solid, reliable. She looked up from her desk and said, Mr. Miller, I've read a lot of stories that start like yours, but very few end the way they should. Let's make sure yours does. Her tone was sharp but kind, like someone who'd seen enough lies to recognize the truth before it even spoke. I told her everything. Every account. Every forged transfer. Every night I spent piecing my life back together. When I finished, she leaned back and said quietly, Rebecca didn't just walk away from you. She walked over you. And I think she left footprints we can trace. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the divorce. Hope. Susan worked fast. She pulled financial records, subpoenaed old bank statements, and brought in a forensic accountant, someone who could follow digital money trails, like a detective follows footprints in the sand, night after night. We sat surrounded by stacks of documents in her office, the glow of desk lamps, reflecting off folders marked Rebecca Miller Financial Review. One by one, the lies came to light. Rebecca had set up multiple shell companies, transferring money under fake business names. She used my company's funds to buy real estate, jewelry, even stocks, all hidden under corporate layers. When Susan showed me the reports, I felt my throat tighten. She built her new life with the bricks of my old one. I whispered. Susan nodded. And now we're going to make her pay for every single one. Outside the legal war, life was still hard. I worked odd jobs, repairing porches, drawing small home designs for neighbors. Nothing glamorous, but it kept the lights on and my spirit alive. Every morning, I'd wake before sunrise, grab a coffee, and tell myself, "Keep moving, John." Meanwhile, Rebecca was living like royalty, new car, designer clothes, photos of vacations on social media. Her posts were always the same, her smiling, holding a glass of wine. Captioned, "Freedom feels good." But freedom built on lies doesn't last long, because while she was celebrating, Susan and I were preparing. Evidence was stacking up, witnesses were ready, and the court date was near. I wasn't just fighting for money anymore. I was fighting for the truth. On the night before the first court hearing, I stood by my window, watching the city lights flicker below. For months, I'd felt powerless, like a man erased from his own story. But now, I had the pen again. The truth was on paper. Justice was in motion. And Rebecca? She had no idea what was coming. I whispered to myself, "You can steal from a man, Rebecca. You can break his heart, his home, his name. But you can't steal from justice." They say the truth doesn't need defending. It just needs time to be heard. And that day, after months of silence, my truth finally got its turn. I remember walking into the courtroom with my lawyer, Susan Carter, by my side. My palms were sweating, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it echo in my ears. Rebecca was already there, sitting across the room, dressed sharp, confident, smiling like someone who had already won. That same smirk she wore the day she took everything from me. I'd seen it before. But this time, it didn't scare me. This time, I wasn't the broken man she left behind. I was the man standing to take everything back. The hearing started quietly. The judge, stern but fair, reviewed the files as Susan began laying out our case. She spoke calmly, with that sharp precision only truth can carry. First came the documents, the forged signatures, the hidden transfers, the ghost accounts Rebecca had created under fake business names. Each paper Susan presented was a strike of lightning, and Rebecca's smirk flickered just a little more each time. Then came the witness, an accountant who once worked with Rebecca. He confirmed everything. She moved funds from Mr. Miller's company into her own accounts, he said. She disguised them as consulting payments. Rebecca shifted in her seat. For the first time, her eyes avoided mine. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, silent, calm, breathing steady. Because for me, this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. When it was Rebecca's turn, she tried to play the same game, tears, excuses. Charmed that she said I'd neglected her, that I was controlling, that she deserved what she took. But this time, her words didn't hold power. The evidence spoke louder than her performance. Susan rose again, her voice steady. "Your Honor, this isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about theft and manipulation hidden behind marriage vows." Then she turned to Rebecca and said something I'll never forget. "You didn't just leave him. You tried to erase him." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge looked up from his papers, eyes sharp and focused. That was the moment the tide turned. Hours passed like minutes. Every second felt like a lifetime. When the judge finally spoke, the world went still, based on the evidence presented. The court finds Rebecca Miller guilty of financial misconduct and fraud. He continued, ordering restitution, reversing asset ownership, restoring the business, and returning what was rightfully mine. It wasn't just money being restored that day. It was dignity. As the gavel hit the desk, Rebecca's face went pale. The smirk was gone. The power she'd stolen crumbled right there, in front of everyone. I didn't look at her with anger. I just looked, and in that moment, I saw her for what she really was. Not a winner, not a mastermind. Just a woman who thought lies could outlast truth. When I stepped outside the courthouse, the air felt different, lighter somehow. The weight I'd carried for years finally lifted. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, for the first time in years, I can breathe again. The sun broke through the clouds above, and for a moment, everything was quiet. No more noise, no more pretending. Just peace. I wasn't rich again. I wasn't even whole yet. But I had something far more powerful, justice. Sometimes life takes everything from you so you can see what's real. Truth, character, strength. Rebecca thought she destroyed me when she took it all. But in trying to bury me, she handed me a shovel and showed me where the truth was buried. And as I walked away from that courthouse, I knew one thing for sure. You can hide lies behind love. You can disguise greed as confidence. But in the end, justice always finds its way home. They say after the storm, the world looks different. And they're right. For months, my life had been nothing but courtrooms, paperwork, and painful memories. But when it all ended, something unexpected happened. Silence. Not the heavy kind that hurts, but the kind that heals. I moved into a small house just outside the city. Nothing fancy, just mine. A white fence, a small porch, and a workshop out back where I could design again. At first, it felt strange, starting over at 45, with no family around, no noise, no laughter. But every morning, I'd brew coffee, open the windows, and remind myself, this is peace, not loneliness. Slowly, I started taking on projects again. Old clients reached out after hearing the court's verdict. They said things like, "We always knew you were the honest one, John." One by one, my designs started selling again. The business I'd lost, the one Rebecca had tried to bury, began to breathe back to life. I wasn't rich, not even close. But I was rebuilding something far more valuable than money, myself. Meanwhile, Rebecca's perfect world began to crumble. Word spread fast about the fraud, the lies, the court ruling. The people who once cheered for her started to disappear. Her new friends cut ties. Her accounts were frozen. Her name, once admired, became a whisper people avoided. I never took joy in it. Watching someone fall, even someone who hurt you, doesn't bring peace. It just reminds you how fragile power is when it's built on lies. From what I heard, she sold the big house. Moved into a small apartment, not far from the one I'd lived in after she left me. Funny how life brings things full circle. Months later, one afternoon, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, I saw Emily standing there. She was holding a small photo, our old family picture. Her eyes were wet. "Dad, I'm sorry. We didn't know." Behind her stood Jake, quieter than usual, his hands in his pockets. He couldn't even look me in the eye. I didn't say much. I just pulled them both into a hug and said, "You don't have to apologize. You're home." It wasn't like before. The past couldn't be erased. But it could be rewritten. We spent hours talking, laughing, filling in the missing years. And for the first time in a long time, my house felt alive again. Sometimes I'd still think about Rebecca. Not with anger anymore, but with understanding. I realized forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about setting yourself free from the weight they left behind. She made her choices, and I made mine. Mine was to move on. One evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. The air was still warm, peaceful. Susan, my lawyer, called just to check in. She laughed and said, "So, Mr. Miller, how does justice feel?" I smiled and replied, like a deep breath after a long storm. As I sat there, I thought back to everything. The love, the lies, the fall, the fight. It all seemed like a different lifetime now. People think revenge is what brings closure. But I learned something different. Revenge only ties you to the past. Truth, that's what frees you. I didn't need to destroy Rebecca. I just needed the truth to speak louder than her lies. And it did. She tried to take everything from me. But in the end, truth gave it all back. I didn't need revenge. Truth did it for me. They say time heals all wounds. But that's not true. Time doesn't heal. It teaches. It teaches you who you are after the storm passes. It teaches you who stays when everything falls apart. And most importantly, it teaches you that silence is not weakness. For a long time I thought staying quiet meant I'd lost. That my silence made me the fool. But I learned something powerful. Don't mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy. Because while Rebecca was celebrating her victory, my silence was building strength. And that strength became justice. Trust is a beautiful thing. But it's also fragile. Once broken, it doesn't just disappear. It transforms you. When Rebecca betrayed me, I thought I'd never trust again. But looking back, I realized it wasn't trust that failed me. It was where I placed it. Trusting the wrong person can break you. But trusting yourself, believing that you can rise again, that's what saves you. I learned to listen to the quiet voice inside, the one I ignored for years. The one that whispered, "Something isn't right." That voice became my compass, my guide through the chaos. Awareness is like light. Once it shines on the truth, you can never go back to the dark. There were years I walked blind, thinking love meant surrender, thinking peace meant silence. But awareness showed me that love should never take away your voice. Real love listens, respects, and stands beside you. It doesn't use your trust as a weapon. When I started paying attention, I began to see more clearly not just what Rebecca did, but how I let it happen. It wasn't about blame anymore. It was about responsibility. Because healing doesn't come from pointing fingers. It comes from understanding where you lost your way and choosing never to walk that same path again. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the form of truth revealed and peace restored. When the judge ruled in my favor, people called it revenge. But I didn't see it that way. Revenge is about getting even. Justice is about getting right. Rebecca lost everything she built on lies. But what I gained was far greater: my dignity, my purpose, and my self-respect. I learned that you don't have to destroy someone to win. All you need to do is stand in the truth long enough for the lies to collapse on their own, and they always do. Starting over wasn't easy. Some nights were still heavy, the kind of silence that reminds you what you lost. But each morning brought a little more light. I rebuilt my business, piece by piece. I reconnected with my kids. And I started finding joy in small things again: a morning walk, a quiet coffee, a day without bitterness. That's what resilience looks like. Not loud victories or dramatic endings, but quiet, consistent steps forward. And somewhere along that path, I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. So, if you're listening to this and carrying the weight of betrayal, remember this: you're not broken. You're being rebuilt. Your pain isn't punishment, it's preparation. Because every person who tries to bury you under lies is just giving you the chance to grow stronger roots. I lost 15 years. But what I found was worth far more than anything she ever took: truth. peace, freedom. Don't mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy. Because when the truth finally speaks, it doesn't whisper. It roars. Life has a way of testing us, breaking us down just enough to see what we're made of. But remember this. Even when everything falls apart, the truth never does. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that justice always finds its way, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Because sometimes, one story can remind a broken heart that healing is possible. And as always, stay strong, stay wise, and never let betrayal define you.